Hey guys, tonight we begin not with ancient castles or Shakespearean stages, but with something far more glittering and ruthless. A Hollywood empire built on dreams and destroyed by pride. Because believe it or not, the fall of a legendary film mogul in the 2000s can teach us more about family, power, and what truly matters than any fairy tale ever could. From penthouse offices to sleeping under freeway overpasses, from billion-dollar studios to rent-controlled apartments, this is a story about a king who gave away his kingdom and discovered too late what he should have been holding on to all along. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Modern tragedy of family, forgiveness, and the price of ambition in the City of Angels. The golden California sun blazed through floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse office at King Studios, casting long shadows across Italian marble floors. This was the empire Leon King had built over 40 years, soundstages stretching across 40 acres of Los Angeles real estate, a library of 500 films, distribution deals spanning every continent, and a name that made studio executives tremble and starlets dream. Leon King, the King of Hollywood, a legend who'd discovered talents that became household names, produced films that won 100 Oscars, and controlled an entertainment machine worth $3 billion. But Leon King was tired, 76 years old, silver-haired, and still imposing in his custom Armani suit. He stood at those windows looking down at Sunset Boulevard, watching the traffic crawl like ants below. Behind him, his office told the story of his reign. Shelves lined with golden statuettes, framed movie posters from classics he'd produced, photographs with presidents and movie stars whose faces defined generations. His mahogany desk, massive and intimidating, held scripts that could become next year's blockbusters, but none of it mattered anymore. He was exhausted from the game, worn down by the constant battles, the backstabbing executives, the demanding directors, the ungrateful actors. He wanted peace. He wanted to rest. Today was the day he'd gather everyone who mattered and make his announcement. His daughters, his executive team, the board members who'd helped him build this kingdom frame by frame, reel by reel. They were assembling now in the screening room on the second floor, the room where he'd previewed 1,000 rough cuts, where he'd decided which films would launch and which would die in development hell. The room smelled of leather seats and expensive cologne, of ambition and power. His assistant, Marcus, knocked softly on the door, a nervous young man with wire-rimmed glasses and a tablet clutched to his chest. "Mr. King, everyone's assembled. They're waiting for you, sir." Leon turned from the window, his weathered face creasing into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Let them wait another 5 minutes, Marcus. Kings don't rush for their subjects." Marcus nodded and disappeared, and Leon allowed himself one last moment of reflection. 3 daughters, 3 very different women who would inherit everything he'd built. Gina, his eldest at 42, the strategic one, always calculating, always networking at the right parties with the right people. She ran King Studios' business affairs division with ruthless efficiency, negotiating distribution deals that squeezed every dollar from international markets. She'd married a studio lawyer, divorced him, and married a talent agent, always climbing, always positioning herself for maximum advantage. Then Regina, 39, the shark in designer heels. She managed King Entertainment's production arm, greenlighting projects with an eye for commercial success that bordered on clairvoyance. She could smell a hit from 1,000 pages of script submissions, Beautiful, cold, and ambitious, Regina had her mother's cheekbones and her father's killer instinct. She'd maneuvered her way through 3 engagement scandals with A-list actors, always landing on her feet, always in the tabloids, always building the brand, and finally Cordelia Cora, as she insisted everyone call her, 28 years old, and she'd broken Leon's heart by rejecting the family business. She'd gone to film school at NYU instead of USC, where he'd pulled strings. She directed independent documentaries about homeless veterans and immigrant workers instead of commercial features. She lived in a modest apartment in Silver Lake instead of the Hollywood Hills mansion he'd offered her. She dated a cinematographer who drove a beat-up Honda and wore thrift store flannel. She was authentic, principled, and frustratingly idealistic. She was also, though Leon would never admit it aloud, his favorite. The plan was simple. He'd divide the empire 3 ways. Each daughter would receive a third of King Studios' assets, production companies, distribution networks, theater chains, intellectual property rights. But first, he wanted to hear them say it. He wanted them to tell him, in front of everyone who mattered in this industry, how much they loved him, how much they appreciated everything he'd built. He'd earned that much, hadn't he? After 40 years of 16-hour days, of gambling everything on risky projects, of missing birthdays and school plays because he was on location in Budapest or negotiating deals in Tokyo, he deserved to hear his daughters acknowledge his greatness. Leon straightened his tie, checked his reflection in the window, still commanding, still powerful, and walked toward his destiny. The screening room hummed with anticipation. 50 of Hollywood's most powerful players sat in plush leather seats arranged in stadium seating, all facing the massive screen that currently displayed the King Studios logo, a crown above a film reel, glowing gold against black. Studio executives in expensive suits checked their BlackBerries. Board members whispered to each other behind manicured hands. Industry veterans who'd worked with Leon since the 70s sat with arms crossed, curious about this mysterious emergency meeting. In the front row sat Leon's 3 daughters, each separated by carefully calculated space. Gina wore a cream Chanel suit, her highlighted hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, her posture impeccable. She radiated controlled power, every gesture measured, every expression practiced. Regina sat in crimson Valentino, her dark hair cascading over bare shoulders, her beauty the kind that stopped traffic and launched perfume campaigns. She scrolled through her iPhone with blood-red nails, projecting boredom even as her eyes tracked every movement in the room. And Cora, in a simple black dress from some vintage shop, no jewelry except small silver earrings, her natural auburn hair loose around her shoulders, looking uncomfortable in this temple of commercial excess. Leon entered through the back doors, and the room fell silent instantly. He walked down the center aisle, slowly, deliberately, letting them absorb his presence. This was his stage, and he knew how to command it. He reached the front, turned to face his audience, and the projection screen behind him switched to a montage of his greatest achievements movie posters scrolling past. Award ceremony footage, premiere night crowds screaming. 40 years, Leon began, his voice still strong, still resonant. 40 years I've given to this industry. I've produced 173 films, 32 of them won Academy Awards. 52 became cultural touchstones that defined their decades. I've employed thousands of people, made stars out of waiters and nobodies, turned dreamers into millionaires. King Studios isn't just a company, it's an institution. It's a legacy. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. But I'm tired. I've earned my rest. So today, I'm announcing my retirement, effective in 60 days. King Studios will be divided among my 3 daughters, who will lead this empire into the future. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Camera phones came out. This was news that would be on Variety and Hollywood Reporter within the hour, on Entertainment Tonight by evening. Leon raised his hand for silence. But before I finalize the division of assets, I want to hear from each of my daughters. I want them to tell me, and tell all of you, what this empire means to them. What I mean to them. After all, legacy isn't just about money and property, it's about love, loyalty, and family. He turned to Gina first, his eldest. She stood smoothly, confidently, and faced the room like she was closing a major deal. Father, what can I say that would adequately capture what you mean to me? You're not just my father, you're my mentor, my inspiration, the standard against which I measure all success. I love you more than words can express, more than eyesight or space or liberty. Everything I am, every skill I possess, every achievement I've earned, I owe to you. King Studios isn't just a business to meet your heart and soul made manifest, and I pledge to honor that, to build upon it, to make you proud every single day of your retirement. You deserve peace, knowing your empire is in devoted hands, my hands. The room erupted in polite applause. Leon beamed, nodding with satisfaction. This was what he wanted to hear. This was what he deserved. He turned to Regina. She rose gracefully, a panther in heels, and delivered her speech with the precision of an actress hitting her marks. Daddy, Gina speaks beautifully, but even her words fall short. I love you beyond measure, beyond comparison. You're the most important person in my life, more valuable than any possession, any relationship, any achievement. I breathe for your approval. I work tirelessly to make you proud. The thought of disappointing you terrifies me more than any failure. When I look at King Studios, I see your genius, your vision, your indomitable will. I promise to guard that vision with my life, to expand this empire in ways that would make you beam with pride. You're not just a father, you're a god among mortals, and I'm blessed to be your daughter. Even more applause. Some board members exchanged skeptical glances. It was a bit much, but Leon radiated pure joy. His daughters understood. They appreciated him. They loved him. Finally, he turned to Cordelia, his youngest. She remained seated, her hands folded in her lap, her expression troubled. Cora, your turn, sweetheart. Cora stood slowly, meeting her father's eyes. The room sensed the shift in energy, the tension suddenly thick as smog over the valley. Dad, I love you as a daughter should love her father. Nothing more, nothing less. Silence crashed through the screening room like a wave. Leon's smile froze on his face, confusion flickering across his weathered features. What did you say? Cora's voice remained steady, quiet, but clear. I love you as a daughter should love her father. I can't put a price on it or dress it up with comparisons. I just love you, honestly. Leon's face darkened, the California sun streaming through the windows suddenly seeming harsher, more unforgiving. Nothing more, after everything I've given you. Your sisters profess their devotion, their dedication to my legacy, and you give me corporate courtesy. Try again, Cordelia. Tell me what King Studios means to you. Cora glanced at her sisters, saw their calculated performances still hanging in the air like perfume, and shook her head. Dad, they can say whatever they want. I can only tell you the truth. I love you, but I won't exaggerate or perform for an inheritance. That's not love, that's business. The room held its collective breath. Cell phones were definitely recording now. This was entertainment industry drama at its finest, a real-life screenplay unfolding in real time. Leon's hands trembled with rage. His face flushed crimson. Not love, not love. You ungrateful, sanctimonious little fool. I built this empire thinking I had 3 daughters to carry it forward. But I see now I only have 2. Regina, you two will split King Studios down the middle, 50-50. Production companies, distribution networks, theater chains, everything. Cordelia gets nothing. Nothing. Gina and Regina exchanged quick glances, surprise, mixed with calculation. They'd expected thirds. Halves were much better. But then Kenneth Grant stood up from the 3rd row. Kent, as everyone called him, had been Leon's best friend for 35 years. They'd started in this business together. 2 hungry kids with a camera and a dream. Kent had been best man at Leon's wedding, godfather to all 3 girls, the studio's chief operating officer and Leon's conscience. He was 68, wearing a rumpled linen suit that cost a fraction of what everyone else wore, and he looked furious. Leon, you're making a mistake. Sit down, think about this. Leon whirled on him. Stay out of this, Kent. This is family business. I am family, you stubborn bastard. I've known those girls since they were born. Cora's the only one who told you the truth. The other 2 just performed auditions for their inheritance. You're punishing honesty and rewarding manipulation, the room gasped. No one talked to Leon King like that. Not in public. Not ever. Leon's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. You're fired, Kent. Security will escort you out. Clean out your office by tonight. If you ever set foot on King Studios property again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Kent stared at his oldest friend, disbelief etched across his face. You're serious? After 35 years, you're throwing me out for telling you the truth. Get out. Kent looked at Cordelia, saw the tears streaming down her face, and nodded slowly. I'm going, but Corinth, you need anything, you call me. Understand? He turned back to Leon. You'll regret this, old friend. When those 2 vultures pick your bones clean, you'll remember this moment. Security guards appeared as if summoned by magic, escorting Kent up the aisle and out of the screening room. The doors closed behind him with a heavy thud that sounded like a coffin lid. Leon turned back to Cordelia, his voice ice. You have 24 hours to vacate your apartment. I own the lease. You have 1 week to remove your name from any King Studios projects or associations. You're not my daughter anymore. You're nothing to me. Cora stood there, tears falling freely now, but her voice didn't waver. I'm sorry you feel that way, Dad, but I won't lie to make you feel powerful. That's not love. She walked up the aisle, every eye in the room following her, and disappeared through the doors. The screening room erupted in whispered conversations, phones furiously texting, the gossip machinery of Hollywood spinning into overdrive. Leon turned to his 2 remaining daughters with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Regina, my office in 1 hour. We'll discuss the transition. The lawyers will draw up the papers. King Studios has 2 queens now. The 2 sisters smiled identical smiles, sharp, hungry, victorious. In the back of the room, Duncan Cole watched the entire scene with calculating interest. Duncan ran a smaller studio, Gloucester Productions, and he'd known Leon for decades. He sat with his 2 sons, Edward, 35, the legitimate heir who ran the company's international division with competence, but no fire, and Edmund, 32, Duncan's son from an affair with a script supervisor 20 years ago. Edmund had worked his way up from the mailroom with nothing but talent and ruthless ambition, and everyone knew he was smarter, sharper, and more dangerous than his older half-brother. Edmund watched Gina and Regina with appreciation. He recognized kindred spirits, people who understood that sentiment was weakness and power was everything. The screening room slowly emptied, people filing out with shocked expressions and phone calls to make. Leon stood alone at the front, staring at the blank screen behind him, and for just a moment, he looked very old and very tired. Outside, the California sun continued blazing over Los Angeles, indifferent to the empire that had just begun its collapse. 3 weeks passed, and the Hollywood trades chronicled every moment of the King Studios transition. Gina took control of the production slate and distribution networks. Regina claimed the theatrical exhibition chain and international markets. They appeared together at industry events, presenting a united front of sisterly cooperation while their lawyers fought vicious battles over every asset valuation behind closed doors. The press ate it up, powerful women taking over from the patriarch, a new era for Hollywood's most legendary studio. Leon moved into Gina's Bel Air estate, a sprawling Mediterranean villa with 12 bedrooms, an Olympic pool, and views stretching to the Pacific. He desold his own penthouse as part of the transitioner, symbolic gesture of retirement that he now regretted. He arrived with an entourage of 20 people. Marcus, his personal assistant, 2 publicists who managed his image, a business manager who handled his remaining investments, 3 security guards, a private chef, a masseuse, his driver, his lawyer, and various other hangers-on who'd attached themselves to Leon King over the years, parasites who fed off his power and status. Gina greeted him warmly that first day, kissing his cheek in front of the photographers she'd tipped off, making sure the images of dutiful daughter welcoming retired father appeared in tomorrow's papers. But once the cameras left, her smile cooled like coffee forgotten on a desk. "Daddy, we need to talk about your staff situation," she said that first evening over dinner on the terrace. Her husband Richard, the talent agent, sat beside her, nodding agreement. 20 people is excessive. This isn't the studio, it's my home. I have my own staff, my own routines. You'll need to downsize. Leon set down his wineglass, confusion crossing his face. Downsize? These people have worked for me for years. They're loyal, they're family, they're employees, Daddy, and they're expensive. Now that you're retired, you don't need publicists managing an image or business managers fielding offers. You need maybe 5 people. Keep Marcus, your driver, 1 security guard, and the chef, if you must. The rest can be let go. Leon's face flushed. I won't dismiss people who've served me faithfully just because you find them inconvenient. Richard leaned forward, his voice smooth and condescending. Leon, let's be practical. You're living in our home. Gina's generosity shouldn't be abused. These people wander through the house at all hours, they use the facilities, they create chaos. It's disruptive. Leon's voice rose. I built an empire that you're both now profiting from, and you're calling my people disruptive. Gina's expression hardened. The empire you divided and gave away. You're retired now. Daddy, that means adjusting to a smaller life. Simplifying. That's what retirement means. The argument lasted until midnight, ending without resolution, but with Leon storming off to his guest suite, feeling the walls of his new life closing in. The next morning, Frankie Shaw appeared at breakfast. Frankie had been Leon's publicist for 28 years. A short woman of 60 with wild grey hair, vintage band t-shirts, and a mouth that never stopped telling uncomfortable truths. She'd managed Leon's image through 3 scandals, 2 divorces, and countless PR nightmares. She was brilliant, abrasive, and utterly loyal. Boss, you look like hell, Frankie announced, pouring herself coffee uninvited. This setup working for you? Not now, Frankie. That's what the captain of the Titanic said. Look, I've been in this business long enough to see when someone's getting played. Your daughters just divided a $3 billion empire, and now they're nickel and diming you about your staff. That's not about convenience, that's about control. Leon glared at her. You don't understand family dynamics. I understand power dynamics. And right now, yours is circling the drain. She bit into a croissant. Also, I'm getting fired, aren't I? Gina's assistant called my office this morning asking about my termination clause. Leon said nothing, which was answer enough. Frankie nodded. Thought so. Well, when this all goes sideways and it will, you know where to find me. I'll be the one saying I told you so from my crappy apartment in Studio City. Across town at Gloucester Productions, a different kind of betrayal was unfolding in Duncan Cole's corner office. Edmund Cole sat across from his father, showing him emails on his laptop with expressions of grave concern. Dad, I found these on Edward's computer. I was looking for the international distribution reports, and I came across his private folder. Duncan leaned forward, reading the emails Edmund had fabricated the night before. Messages that appeared to be from Edward to competitors, discussing hostile takeover strategies for Gloucester Productions, plans to push Duncan into early retirement and sell the company to a media conglomerate. Edward wrote these. Duncan's voice shook. His legitimate son, his heir, plotting against him. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't want to believe it either. But read them. It's all there. Duncan read, his face growing pale, and Edmund watched his father's trust shatter with the satisfaction of an artist completing his masterpiece. By the end of the first month, Leon's staff had been reduced to 10 people. Gina insisted, then demanded, then simply informed him that his publicists were gone, his business manager dismissed, half his security detail terminated. Each morning brought new humiliations. His driver was told to park on the street instead of the circular driveway. His chef was limited to using the kitchen only during specified hours. Marcus was instructed to check with Gina's assistant before scheduling anything on Leon's calendar. Leon raged, threatened, reminded everyone who he was and what he'd built. But without the studio behind him, his threats rang hollow. He was a king without a kingdom, a general without an army. Gina listened to his complaints with practiced patience, the way one might tolerate a difficult child, and then did exactly what she'd planned to do anyway. You're being unreasonable, Daddy, she said one evening when he confronted her about firing his masseuse. You're retired. You need to accept that. The world has moved on. The studio has moved on. I'm running things now, and frankly, you're undermining my authority by acting like you're still in charge. I built that studio. I made you who you are, and I'm grateful. But gratitude doesn't mean I let you run my household like a circus. You want more freedom? Maybe Regina's house would suit you better. The suggestion landed like a slap. Leon stared at his eldest daughter and saw something he'd never seen before: contempt. She wasn't afraid of him. She didn't need him. He was an inconvenience she was managing until she could dispose of him more permanently. Fine, Leon said coldly. I'll stay with Regina. She appreciates me. Gina's smile was all teeth. I'm sure she does. Leon moved to Regina's Hollywood Hills mansion 2 days later with his remaining staff of 7 people. Regina greeted him with champagne and caviar, with a suite overlooking the city, with promises that he could have anything he wanted. For 3 days, it felt like respect restored. Regina asked his opinion on scripts, invited him to production meetings, laughed at his war stories from the old days. Then the bills started arriving. Marcus brought them to Leon's suite with apologetic confusion. Mr. King, Regina's business manager, sent these. They're charging us for utilities, staff meals, use of the home theater, even the champagne from your first night. There's a daily rate, For your room, $3,000 a night. Leon snatched the papers, scanning them with disbelief. Every comfort, every amenity, itemized and priced. He was being charged to live in his own daughter's home like a hotel guest. He found Regina by the infinity pool, taking a meeting with a director about their next tentpole release. She held up one finger waiting and finished her call before turning to him with practiced warmth. "Daddy, enjoying your suite? What the hell is this?" He thrust the bills at her. "You're charging me to stay here." Regina's expression didn't flicker. "Of course. Daddy, you have 7 staff members eating our food, using our water and electricity, occupying space. Did you think that was free? I'm running a business here, not a charity. You have your retirement accounts, your investments. You can afford it. I'm your father, and I love you. But love doesn't mean financial irresponsibility. Gina charged you to, she just hid it in more polite language. I'm being honest." She stood, kissed his cheek. "Besides, you always taught me that in this town, nothing is free. Everything has a price. Consider it a valuable lesson remembered." Leon felt the ground shifting beneath him. The world he understood crumbling like a set being struck after filming wrapped. He'd given them everything, and they were billing him for their affection. That night, Frankie showed up at Regina's gate, arguing with security until Leon told them to let her through. She found him on his suite's balcony, staring at the lights of Los Angeles, spread below like broken glass. "Still think I don't understand family dynamics." Frankie settled into a chair uninvited. "I heard you're getting charged $3,000 a night. That's actually more expensive than the Four Seasons. At least they include breakfast." "Go away, Frankie." "Can't. I'm worried about you." "Boss, you need to swallow your pride and call Cora. She's the only one who told you the truth, and you crucified her for it." Leon's hands gripped the balcony railing. "Never. She betrayed me. She loved you. There's a difference, but you're too stubborn to see it." Frankie pulled out her phone. "Want to know what she's doing? I still follow her on Instagram. She's in New Mexico, shooting a documentary about Native American water rights. Living in a trailer, eating craft services, doing the work she believes in. She hasn't said one word to the press about you, even though TMZ offered her $50,000 for an interview. That's loyalty, Leon." I said, "Never." Frankie sighed, standing. "Your funeral. Literally, at this rate. You look terrible, by the way. When's the last time you slept? Ate a real meal? You're 76 years old, and your blood pressure must be through the roof." She left, and Leon stood alone on the balcony, feeling very small beneath the indifferent stars. At Gloucester Productions, Duncan Cole sat in his office with his hand on the phone, trying to gather courage. Before him lay the fabricated emails Edmund had shown him, printed and highlighted. His legitimate son Edward was in Tokyo, finalizing a distribution deal that would net the company $40 million. But according to these emails, Edward was actually meeting with executives from MediaCorp International to broker a sale of Gloucester Productions behind Duncan's back. Edmund stood by the window, the picture of concerned loyalty. "I know it's hard, Dad, but you have to protect yourself. Protect the company. He's my son, my heir. Everything I built was supposed to go to him, and he's throwing it away for a quick payday from corporate raiders." Edmund's voice carried just the right note of sorrowful conviction. "I didn't want to believe it either, but the evidence is right there. While he's supposedly in Tokyo working for Gloucester, he's actually dismantling it piece by piece." Duncan's finger hovered over the phone. One call could verify everything. But Edmund had already thought of that, had already poisoned that well. If you tip him off, he'll destroy the evidence. He'll make you look paranoid. You know how persuasive Edward can be. Everyone loves the golden boy. By the time you prove anything, the company will be sold and he'll be counting his payout. What should I do?" Edmund moved beside his father, placing a hand on his shoulder with perfect theatrical sympathy. "Fire him before he can finalize the sale. Change all the company passwords and access codes. Lock him out completely. Then we can assess the damage and rebuild. Together, Dad. The way it should have been all along." Duncan made the call. Within 2 hours, Edward Cullinescent, competent, loyal Edward, was terminated via email, his corporate access revoked, his name stripped from the company website. He landed at LAX 8 hours later to discover he no longer had a job, an inheritance, or his father's trust. Edmund's carefully constructed lies had destroyed everything Edward had spent his life building. Meanwhile, Leon's situation continued its downward spiral. Regina reduced his staff to 5 people, then 3. She began scheduling the home theater and media room so that Leon's access was limited to specific hours. She asked him to keep his voice down during her business calls, to avoid the kitchen during her private chef's hours, to essentially make himself invisible in a mansion with 23 rooms. When Leon protested, Regina's mask finally slipped. They stood in her marble foyer at midnight, both exhausted from another evening of passive-aggressive warfare. "You want the truth, Daddy? You're embarrassing. You're a relic from a different era, and you don't understand that your time is over. You had your reign. You won your Oscars. You built your empire, and then you gave IT away. You have no power anymore. You're just an old man living on his daughter's charity, and charity has limits." Leon stood there, stunned into silence by the venom in her voice. This was his daughter, his brilliant Regina, looking at him like he was garbage, cluttering her perfect life. "I want to be treated with respect," he said quietly. "Respect is earned, Daddy. What have you done lately besides complain?" Something broke inside Leon King at that moment. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet finality of a thread snapping. He turned and climbed the stairs to his suite, moving like a man 3 times his age. Marcus found him 20 minutes later, sitting in the dark, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Marcus, call whoever's left on my staff. We're leaving." "Leaving to where, Mr. King?" "I don't care. A hotel, a motel, anywhere but here." At 1 in the morning, Leon King left his daughter's mansion with 3 people: Marcus, his driver Tony, and a security guard named Phil. No luggage, no plan, no destination. They drove through empty Los Angeles streets in Leon's town car, passing palm trees and darkened billboards advertising movies he'd produced, past the studio that bore his name, through a city that had once worshipped him and now didn't care that he was homeless. Tony glanced in the rearview mirror. "Mr. King, where to?" Leon stared out the window at the neon wasteland of Sunset Boulevard. At 2 in the morning, strip clubs and liquor stores and desperate people hunting for something they'd never find. "Just drive. I need to think." His phone buzzed. A text from Gina. "Heard you left Regina's. Don't even think about coming back here. Maybe learn some gratitude before you burn all your bridges." Another text from Regina. "You're welcome back when you're ready to be reasonable. Until then, good luck." Leon turned off his phone and let the city lights blur past, feeling smaller and more lost than he'd felt in 50 years. Somewhere in New Mexico, his youngest daughter slept in a trailer, probably not thinking about him at all. He'd thrown her away for telling the truth, and now the liars had thrown him away for being inconvenient. The town car rolled through the dark city, carrying a fallen king toward nowhere, while the Hollywood sign glowed white on the hills above. Permanent, indifferent, outlasting everyone who ever thought they'd conquered this town. Leon King spent the next 2 weeks in a cheap motel off the 101 freeway in Sherman, Oakster. Kind of place where the neon sign flickered vacancy 24 hours a day and sirens wailed through thin walls every night. The Blue Star Motor Lodge, $39 a night. Weekly rates available, no questions asked. His suite at Regina's had cost more per hour than this room cost per week. The carpet was stained, the bedspread smelled of cigarettes and regrets, and the window looked out at a parking lot where broken dreams came to die. Marcus tried to maintain some dignity, bringing coffee from Starbucks each morning, pressing Leon's shirts in the cramped bathroom, pretending this was temporary. Tony, the driver, slept in the town car most nights, unable to afford his own room. Phil, the security guard, had quit after 3 days, apologizing but explaining he had a family to feed and Leon couldn't pay him anymore. The money was running out faster than anyone had expected. Retirement accounts were tied up in trusts that Gina and Regina's lawyers now controlled. Leon had cash, but not much, and the parasites who'd surrounded him for decades had evaporated like morning fog once the paychecks stopped. Leon spent his days sitting on the motel balcony, watching traffic crawl along the freeway, trying to understand how his life had collapsed so completely. At night, he wandered the streets of Sherman Oaks, a ghost haunting his own existence. Sometimes he'd stand outside King Studios' gates at 3 in the morning, staring at the Crown logo illuminated above the entrance, remembering when those gates opened for him automatically. When security guards saluted him, when his name meant something. The night manager at the Blue Star, a 60-year-old woman named Gloria with bleached hair and kind eyes, started leaving extra coffee and donuts at his door each morning. She recognized him. Everyone in Los Angeles recognized Leon King, but she never said anything. She just left small kindnesses and looked the other way when he couldn't quite remember which room was his. Kenneth Grant found him on a Thursday evening, sitting in the motel parking lot on a plastic chair, staring at nothing. Kent had been searching for Leon for a week, calling old contacts, checking hotels, following rumors, when he finally located the Blue Star Motor Lodge and saw his old friend in shaven, wearing the same wrinkled suit for days, looking 20 years older than he had a month ago. Kent felt his heart break. Jesus Christ, Leon. Leon looked up, his eyes taking a moment to focus. Kent, they said you were blacklisted. Said you'd never work in this town again. They were right. I'm unemployable. Turns out, loyalty to you is career poison. Kent pulled up another plastic chair. But I've got savings, and more importantly, I've got a spare bedroom. Come stay with me. I'm not a charity case. You're my friend, you stubborn bastard. And you look like hell. When's the last time you ate? Leon couldn't remember. Time had become fluid, meaningless. Days blurred together in a haze of regret and confusion. Kent stood, making a decision. Marcus, help me get him up. We're leaving. Marcus emerged from the motel room, relief flooding his face. Mr. Grant, thank God, he won't listen to me. He just sits out here for hours, talking to himself. Together, they lifted Leon and he felt disturbingly light. Fragiland guided him toward Kent's car, a practical Honda Accord that had never seen valet parking at industry events. Leon moved like a sleepwalker, offering no resistance, no commentary. The fight had gone out of him. Kent's apartment was in Burbank, a modest tube room in a complex with a pool that nobody used and landscaping that tried its best. Clean, simple, nothing like the palaces Leon's daughters inhabited. Kent settled Leon into the guest room, brought him soup and bread, and watched his oldest friend eat mechanically, without pleasure or awareness. You need to see a doctor, Kent said. You're not well, Leon. This isn't just stress, something's wrong. Everything's wrong. I gave them everything, Kent. My whole empire. And they threw me away like yesterday's box office receipts. One of them didn't. Cora told you the truth, and you punished her for it. She's the only one who actually loved you. Leon's hands shook, soup spilling from the spoon. I can't call her. I can't face her after what I said, what I did. Pride is expensive, old friend, and you can't afford it anymore. That night, Los Angeles was hit by the first major storm of the season, rare for Southern California. But when the weather turned, it turned violently. Rain hammered the city like judgment, lightning cracking across the sky, thunder rattling windows. The storm knocked out power across 3 neighborhoods, flooded the 405 freeway, sent mudslides cascading down the Hollywood Hills. Leon stood at Kent's window watching the deluge, and something inside him cracked wide open. He walked out of the apartment into the storm before Kent could stop him, Marcus shouting his name. But Leon didn't hear anything except the roar of water and wind and his own disintegrating mind. Leon King walked into the storm with his arms spread wide, his face turned toward the black sky. Rain soaking through his expensive suit that had cost $3,000 and now hung on his frame like a shroud. Lightning illuminated Burbank in stark white flashes, and Leon screamed at the heavens with a voice that had once commanded boardrooms and terrified studio executives. Is this what you want? Is this enough? I gave them everything. Thunder answered, indifferent and absolute. Rain pounded the empty streets, flooding gutters, turning intersections into rivers. Leon stumbled forward. No destination, no purpose, just movement through the deluge. Water streamed down his face, rain, and tears impossible to distinguish, and his mind, already fractured by betrayal and loss, began to shatter completely. Marcus chased after him, shouting, Mr. King, please, come back inside. But Leon was beyond hearing, beyond reason. He raged at the storm, at God, at the universe that had allowed him to build an empire only to watch it devour him. I was Leon King. I made stars. I created dreams, and they threw me away like I was nothing. He slipped on the flooded sidewalk, fell hard onto the concrete, and lay there in 6 inches of rushing water, laughing and crying simultaneously. The rain felt like punishment, like cleansing, like the ending he deserved. Marcus reached him, tried to lift him, but Leon pushed him away with surprising strength. Leave me. Let the storm take me. I deserve this. I threw away the only daughter who loved me, and now I'm drowning in my own stupidity. A figure emerged from the darkness, homeless man taking shelter under a shuttered bus stop, watching this drama unfold with the detached interest of someone who'd seen everything Los Angeles could throw at humanity. He was perhaps 50, weathered and worn, wrapped in garbage bags against the rain, and something about him seemed familiar, though Leon couldn't place it. The man shuffled over, stood above Leon, sprawled in the flooded gutter. I know you. You're Leon King. You fired me 12 years ago from King Studios. I was a set designer, Harold Porter. You said my work was derivative and uninspired, had security escort me out in front of everyone. Leon stared up at him through the rain, past and present colliding. Harold, I lost my house 6 years ago, been on the streets ever since. And now here you are, lying in a gutter in a storm, screaming at clouds. Funny how things turn out. Leon expected hatred, mockery, revenge, but Harold just extended his hand. Come on, there's a dry spot under the overpass. Storm's getting worse. Marcus helped lift Leon, and the 3 of them, a fallen king, his loyal assistant, and the homeless man the king had destroyed made their way through flooding streets toward the underpass where society as forgotten gathered. 20 people huddled there in the dry concrete space beneath the freeway. The addicted, the mentally ill, the economically destroyed, the ones Los Angeles had chewed up and spit out. They had shopping carts full of everything they owned, cardboard shelters that the rain was slowly destroying, and eyes that had seen too much suffering to be shocked by anything. They made room for Leon without recognition or judgment. Here, under this bridge, everyone was equal in their destitution. Leon sat on cold concrete, shivering, his mind spiraling. He looked at these people, truly looked at them for the first time in his life. How many movies had he made where homeless people were set dressing, background extras to establish gritty atmosphere? How many times had he driven past scenes like this in his town car with tinted windows, never really seeing the humans suffering there? "I never noticed," he whispered. 40 years in this city, and I never actually saw you." Harold settled beside him, sharing a tattered blanket that smelled of mildew and exhaust fumes. "Rich people never do. We're invisible until you become us." Above them, the freeway roared with rare storm traffic, every car fleeing to somewhere dry and safe. Leon King had nowhere to flee. He pulled the filthy blanket around his shoulders and felt his mind fragmenting like film dissolving in acid. Memories flooded through him, unbidden and chaotic, his daughters as children, their first steps and first words. Gina's face when he missed her 8th birthday because he was in Cannes. Regina crying at her high school graduation when he arrived 2 hours late. Cordelia, little Cora, age 6, asking why Daddy was never home, and him always answering, "I'm building something for you. I'm building an empire for our family." But he'd built a prison. He'd built a golden cage that corrupted everyone it touched. "I destroyed them," Leon said, to no one in particular, to everyone sheltering under the bridge. "I thought I was giving them the world, but I was teaching them that love was transactional, that everything had a price, that power mattered more than people." Marcus sat beside him, loyal to the end, despite not being paid in 2 weeks. "Mr. King, you need rest and medical attention. Your hands won't stop shaking." Leon looked at his trembling hands that had signed billion-dollar deals, that had held Oscars, that had commanded empires. Now they couldn't hold a cup of water steady. "I think I'm dying, Marcus. Not my body though, that's failing too. My mind, I can feel it slipping away like sand through fingers." Thunder crashed directly overhead, and the storm intensified. Water began seeping under the overpass, forcing everyone to move deeper into the concrete darkness. Leon King spent that night under the freeway overpass, drifting in and out of fevered consciousness while the storm raged above. His body burned with fever, his mind cycling through decades of memories in random, fractured sequences. He saw himself as a young man with nothing but ambition and a camera. He saw his wife dead now 15 years, begging him to spend more time with their daughters. He saw every choice he'd made that led to this moment, lying on concrete, surrounded by the discarded humans his city had abandoned. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving Los Angeles washed clean and glittering under apologetic sunshine. Kent arrived in his Honda just after sunrise, having searched all night, and found Leon unconscious, burning with fever, Marcus trying desperately to keep him warm with Harold's donated blankets. Hospital, now. Kent lifted Leon with Marcus's help, carrying his delirious friend to the car. The homeless community watched them go in silence, offering neither help nor hindrance, just bearing witness to another tragedy in a city built on broken dreams. At Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, doctors diagnosed severe pneumonia, dehydration, and what they delicately termed acute stress-induced cognitive decline. Leon drifted in and out of consciousness for 2 days, hooked to IV antibiotics and fluids, while Kent sat vigil in the chair beside his bed. The doctors warned that with his immune system compromised by stress and malnutrition, Leon's prognosis was uncertain. Kent made the call he'd been dreading. He tracked down Cordelia in New Mexico, reached her on a spotty cell connection from the desert where she was filming. "Cora, it's Kent Grant. Your father's in the hospital. It's serious." Silence on the line, long enough that Kent thought they'd been disconnected. Then her voice, tight with emotion. "Which hospital?" "Cedar Sinai. Room 412. Cora, he's been living on the streets. Your sisters threw him out. He's been..." Kent's voice broke. "He's been homeless, honey, sleeping in motels and under bridges. His mind is going. He needs you." Another pause. "I'm wrapping production today. I'll be on the first flight to LAX tomorrow morning." Kent closed his eyes with relief. "Thank you. He doesn't deserve your forgiveness, but he's still my father," Cora said quietly, and ended the call. The news of Leon King's hospitalization hit the entertainment press within hours. TMZ ran the headline, "Fallen King, legendary producer hospitalized after living homeless." The story went viral. Photos of Leon being carried from Kent's car, looking skeletal and confused, his expensive suit filthy and torn. The narrative was irresistible. Powerful mogul brought low by ungrateful daughters. Shakespeare played out in Hollywood Hills. Gina's publicist released a statement. Gina King is saddened by her father's health crisis and wishes him a full recovery. However, Mr. King's recent choices, including refusing reasonable accommodations and professional help, have made family support difficult. "We hope he gets the care he needs." Regina's statement was even colder. Regina King has always welcomed her father into her home under reasonable conditions. His refusal to accept boundaries or modify his excessive demands made cohabitation impossible. "This situation is tragic, but was entirely avoidable had Mr. King been willing to accept his new circumstances with grace." The public reaction was swift and brutal. Social media exploded with outrage at the daughter's cold responses. #JusticeForLeon King trended for 2 days. Think pieces appeared in Variety and Hollywood Reporter about elder abuse and family betrayal, but Gina and Regina, safely insulated by lawyers and publicists, simply stopped commenting and let the news cycle move on to the next scandal. Meanwhile, across town at Gloucester Productions, Edmund Cole was consolidating his victory. With Edward fired and discredited, Duncan had promoted Edmund to president of production, the position Edward had spent his entire life earning. Edmund moved into the corner office, hired his own team of ruthless operators, and began implementing changes that would make Gloucester more profitable and infinitely more cutthroat. But Edward wasn't finished. Fired, broke, and furious, he'd started investigating the emails that had destroyed his career. He hired a forensic IT specialist who discovered the digital fingerprints, evidence that those damning messages had been created on Edmund's laptop, backdated, and planted in a shared server to frame Edward. The betrayal was total, calculated, and provable. Edward sat in a coffee shop in Studio City, staring at the forensic report, and felt something cold and hard crystallize in his chest. His half-brother had destroyed him with lies, and their father had believed every word. The legitimate son had been thrown away for the bastard's ambition. There would be consequences for that. Back at Cedar Sinai, Leon woke on his 3rd day in the hospital to find Kent dozing in the bedside chair. Rain streaked the windows. Another storm moving through, gentler this time. Leon's mind felt clearer than it had in weeks. The fever broken, the medications stabilizing his system. He looked at his oldest friend, grey and exhausted, who'd sacrificed everything to stay loyal, and felt shame so profound it physically hurt. "Kent," Leon whispered. Kent jerked awake. "You're back. Thank God. How do you feel?" "Like I've been dead, and they sent me back, because hell was too good for me." Leon's voice was raspy, weak. "Marcus, he's fine. Getting coffee. Leon, Cora's coming. She'll be here this afternoon." Leon closed his eyes, tears leaking from the corners. "I don't deserve her." "No, you don't. But she's coming anyway. That's what real love looks like, old friend. Not the performance art your other daughters delivered. Actual, unconditional love." Leon turned his face toward the window, watching rain blur the Los Angeles skyline, and waited for his youngest daughter to arrive, knowing he'd destroyed everything between them, praying desperately that somehow, against all odds and reason, there might be something left to salvage from the wreckage of his empire and his family. Cordelia King arrived at Cedar-Sinai Medical Center at 2 in the afternoon, wearing faded jeans and a denim jacket dusty from New Mexico desert roads. She'd driven 18 hours straight from the film location, refusing to wait for morning flights. Fueled by coffee and the terrible knowledge that she might arrive too late. Her cinematographer boyfriend Jake had offered to come, but she'd declined. This was something she needed to face alone. She stood outside room 412 for 5 full minutes, her hand on the door handle, gathering courage. The last time she'd seen her father, he'd disowned her in front of 50 industry power players. Destroyed her with words that still echoed in her nightmares. She'd spent 3 months trying to process that rejection, trying to understand how love could be weaponized so efficiently. And now Kent was telling her Leon had been homeless, broken, that his mind was fragmenting. Part of her wanted to walk away, to let him face the consequences of his cruelty. But a larger part, the part that remembered him teaching her to ride a bike, attending her elementary school plays when work permitted. The rare moments when he'd been just dad instead of Leon King, the legend, that part made her turn the handle and enter. Leon lay in the hospital bed, looking impossibly small, diminished in ways that had nothing to do with physical size. Hospital gowns stripped everyone of dignity. But on Leon King, a man who'd commanded rooms through pure presence, the effect was devastating, for lines snaked into his arms. Monitors beeped softly, tracking vital signs that had nearly flatlined 3 days earlier. His face was gaunt, unshaven, aged 20 years in 3 months. His hands, those powerful hands that had signed contracts worth billions, trembled against the white sheets. Kent stood when Cora entered, relief flooding his features. "I'll give you to some privacy." He squeezed her shoulder as he passed. "Take your time." The door clicked shut, and father and daughter stared at each other across a chasm of hurt that seemed unbridgeable. Leon's eyes filled with tears immediately, not the angry tears of frustration he'd shed under the freeway, but tears of shame and gratitude and desperate hope. "Cora," he whispered, his voice broken. "You came." She moved to the bedside, slowly, studying this stranger who wore her father's face. "Kent said you were sick. I'm dying. Not today, maybe not this month, but soon. The doctors are too polite to say it, but I can feel it. My body's failing, and my mind." His hands shook harder. "My mind is leaving me in pieces. Sometimes I don't know where I am or what year it is. Sometimes I think I'm back at the studio, and then I remember I gave it all away to daughters who hated me. They didn't hate you, Dad. They just loved your money more than they loved you." Leon flinched at the truth of it. "And you? Do you hate me? You should. God knows I deserve it." Cora pulled the visitor's chair close to the bed and sat down, her hands folded in her lap. For a long moment she said nothing, just looked at this man who'd given her life and then tried to destroy it. I don't hate you. I'm angry and I'm hurt, but I don't hate you. You're still my father. I was a terrible father. I put the studio above everything, above your mother, above you girls, above basic human decency. I taught you that love was conditional, that approval had to be earned through performance and flattery. And when you refused to play that game, when you told me the truth, I punished you for it. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Cora. I'm so profoundly sorry. Tears streamed down Cora's face now. All the emotions she'd bottled for 3 months, breaking free. Do you know what it did to me? Being disowned in front of all those people. Having my name stripped from every project, every credit. I had to explain to everyone I worked with why Leon King's daughter was suddenly persona non grata in Hollywood. I lost 3 jobs because producers were afraid of alienating you. I know, Kent told me. I destroyed you because my pride couldn't handle honesty. Your pride destroyed everything, Dad. Your empire, your relationships, your health, your mind. Was it worth it? All that power, all that control, was it worth ending up homeless and half mad? Leon closed his eyes, and more tears leaked out. No, God, no. I would trade every Oscar, every dollar, every moment of power for one more day with you when you were 6 years old and thought I hung the moon. Before I ruined everything. Cora reached out slowly and took her father's trembling hand. His skin felt papery, fragile, like tissue that might tear at the slightest pressure. You can't undo the past, Dad. But you're still here. You're still alive. That means something. What does it mean? I have no empire, no money, no home. Your sisters took everything and threw me away like garbage. I'm a cautionary tale now, the king who gave away his kingdom and died in the gutter. You're not dead yet, and you have something your other daughters will never have. You have the truth. You finally see what really matters. Cora squeezed his hand gently. I'm going to help you. Not because you deserve it, but because I love you. The real you, not the legend or the mogul. Just my dad. Leon sobbed then, deep, wrenching sounds that shook his frail body. The monitors beeped frantically as his heart rate spiked. A nurse appeared at the door, concerned, but Cora waved her away. This grief needed to flow, needed to be released after decades of being buried under ambition and pride. When the storm passed, Leon lay exhausted against his pillows, hollowed out but somehow lighter. What happens now? Now you recover, then we figure out what comes next. I have money saved from my documentaries, not much, but enough to rent us a small place. You, me, Kent, and Marcus. We'll be okay. A small place, Leon repeated, the concept foreign to someone who'd lived in penthouses and mansions for 40 years. I don't know how to live small, Cora. You'll learn. And Dad. It's actually kind of beautiful once you stop fighting it. Over the next week, as Leon slowly regained strength, Cora began rebuilding the wreckage of his life. She found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Silver Lake, the neighborhood where she'd always lived, far from the ostentatious displays of wealth in Bel Air and Hollywood Hills. 800 square feet, rent-controlled, with a small balcony overlooking a community garden where actual neighbors grew actual vegetables. It was a universe away from the world Leon had inhabited. Kent and Marcus helped move in the few possessions Leon had left, some clothes, a box of photographs, nothing else. Everything that had defined Leon King's existence had been stripped away, leaving only the man underneath. Fragile, confused sometimes, but finally, painfully real. But while this small reconciliation unfolded, darker forces were gathering momentum. Gina and Regina, furious that their father had survived his collapse and reconnected with Cordelia, began coordinating their response. They met at Regina's mansion, their alliance solidified by mutual self-interest and the emerging threat of Cora's influence. "She turned him against us completely," Gina said, swirling scotch in crystal. "She convinced him to challenge the transfer of assets, claim diminished capacity when he signed everything over. We could lose everything." Regina nodded, her mind already calculating angles. "We need to neutralize her. Discredit her before she can mount any legal challenge." "How?" Regina smiled, cold and calculating. "I have a production assistant who's friendly with one of Cora's documentary crew. Apparently, there were some ethical concerns on her last project payments to interview subjects that could be construed as bribery. Nothing was proven, but in the right hands, with the right media spin, we could make her look like a hypocrite, the principled daughter who preaches documentary ethics while paying for testimony. That's thin. It's enough to plant doubt, and doubt is all we need. By the time she defends herself, the narrative is set she's just another Hollywood opportunist using Dad's tragedy for her own gain." The sisters raised their glasses, toasting their conspiracy, while across town, their father learned to make coffee in a tiny kitchen and found unexpected peace in the simplicity. At Gloucester Productions, Edmund Cole was playing an even more dangerous game. He'd successfully consolidated control, but his half-brother, Edward, was becoming a problem. Edward had evidence of the email forgery, and while Duncan still refused to believe his legitimate son, others in the company were starting to ask questions. Edmund needed to eliminate the threat permanently. He arranged a meeting with Edward in a parking garage downtown, ostensibly to discuss a settlement. Edward came armed with his forensic evidence, ready to expose Edmund's betrayal, but Edmund came armed with something more immediately effective: a hired thug named Ray, who specialized in making problems disappear. The meeting lasted 5 minutes. Edward never had a chance to present his evidence. Ray's baseball bat made sure of that. They left Edward bleeding on the concrete, his ribs broken, his evidence scattered and destroyed, his phone smashed. The message was clear: stay silent, or the next beating would be fatal. Edmund walked away without looking back, his expression never changing, his hands clean of the violence he'd orchestrated. That night, Cordelia sat with her father on the tiny balcony of their Silver Lake apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Leon wore sweatpants and a UCLA hoodie, clothes Cora had bought him at Target, the first time he'd worn anything not custom-tailored in 50 years. "It's beautiful," Leon said quietly, watching colors shift across the horizon. "It's always been beautiful, Dad. You just never stopped to look." 2 weeks later, the media assault began. TMZ posted a story at 6 in the morning, "Cordelia King, documentary ethics under fire." By noon, Variety had picked it up with a more respectable veneer. Questions raised about King-daughter-s filmmaking practices. The narrative was carefully crafted allegations that Cora had paid interview subjects for her documentary about homeless veterans, compromising journalistic integrity. Anonymous sources from her film crew. Grainy photos of cash exchanges that could have been anything but were framed as corruption. Cora's phone exploded with calls from journalists, festival programmers pulling her films from consideration, funding sources demanding explanations. She sat at the tiny kitchen table in their Silver Lake apartment, watching her reputation disintegrate in real time across social media, and knew exactly who was behind it. "It's Gina and Regina," she told Kent and Marcus. "This is retaliation for taking Dad in. They want to destroy my credibility before I can challenge the asset transfers." Kent nodded grimly. "Can you prove the allegations are false?" "Of course I can. The payments were standard per diem rates for travel expenses, all documented and approved. But by the time I prove that, the damage is done. People remember the accusation, not the correction. Leon emerged from the bedroom, confused and agitated. His good days were becoming rarer, his lucid moments briefer. What's happening? Why are people shouting? The TV was off. No one was shouting. But in Leon's fragmenting mind, voices echoed from memories and hallucinations, past and present colliding without boundary. Cora went to him, taking his hands. "It's okay, Dad. Just the neighbors. Come sit down. I need to get to the studio. There's a production meeting. They're waiting for me. You're retired, remember? You don't have meetings anymore." Leon's face crumpled with confusion and distress. "I don't understand. Where's my office? Where's Marcus? I need Marcus." "I'm right here, Mr. King." Marcus appeared with practiced patience, guiding Leon to the couch. "Let's watch some old films. Would you like that?" This was the routine now. Leon cycled through confusion, lucidity, and despair multiple times daily. The doctors called it vascular dementia, accelerated by stress and malnutrition. His brain was dying in patches, memories dissolving like film exposed to sunlight. Sometimes he thought he was 30 years old and about to shoot his first feature. Sometimes he recognized Cora and wept with gratitude. Sometimes he looked at her like she was a stranger invading his home. Caring for him was exhausting, heartbreaking, and surprisingly tender. Cora had never been this close to her father, not in childhood, not ever. Now she fed him when he forgot to eat, dressed him when he couldn't manage buttons, held him when nightmares woke him at 3 in the morning. She was learning who Leon King had been underneath the legend, finding fragments of the man her mother had married. The dreamer who'd once genuinely loved cinema before ambition consumed him. Across town, Edward Cole lay in a hospital bed of his own, his jaw wired shut, 3 ribs broken, 1 lung collapsed. The police report called it a mugging, wrong place, wrong time. But Edward knew the truth. His half-brother had tried to kill him for threatening to expose the truth. When he was released, Edward didn't go to the police with accusations he couldn't prove. Instead, he went underground, contacting journalists, lawyers, and former Gloucester employees that Edmund had fired or betrayed. He was building a case, slowly, methodically, waiting for the right moment to destroy his brother the way Edmund had tried to destroy him. Meanwhile, Duncan Cole sat in his office at Gloucester Productions, finally beginning to doubt. Anonymous emails had started arriving, screenshots of inconsistencies in the evidence Edmund had provided, testimony from IT staff about server manipulations, questions that gnawed at Duncan's certainty. What if he'd been wrong? What if his legitimate son had been innocent and the bastard son had played him perfectly? But pride and fear kept Duncan silent. Admitting he'd been deceived would mean admitting he'd destroyed his own heir, fractured his family irreparably. So he said nothing, did nothing, and watched Edmund consolidate power while doubt poisoned his sleep. Back in Silver Lake, night fell over the small apartment. Cora sat on the balcony after Leon had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from another day of battling media attacks and managing her father's decline. Her phone buzzed, her cinematographer boyfriend, calling from New Mexico where he was finishing the documentary without her. "How are you holding up?" His voice was warm, concerned. "I'm drowning, Jake. The media is destroying me. Dad's getting worse every day, and I can't see a way forward. Come back. Let your sisters deal with your father. They're the ones with resources. You're sacrificing everything for a man who threw you away. He's different now. He's broken and scared and sorry. I can't abandon him, even if it costs you your career, your reputation, everything you've built." Cora looked through the sliding glass door at her father sleeping on the couch, Marcus keeping watch from a chair, Kent dozing in the corner. This makeshift family held together by loyalty and love, rather than money and power. Yeah, she said quietly. Even then, Jake sighed. You're a better person than me. Or maybe just more stubborn. After they hung up, Cora sat in the darkness, watching lights twinkle across the valley, and wondered how much longer she could hold the pieces together before everything shattered completely. Inside, Leon woke from a nightmare, calling for his dead wife, for his lost daughters, for a life he'd destroyed with his own hands, and Marcus held him while he cried, an old man unmade by his own choices, surrounded by the few people who loved him anyway. The unraveling began on a Tuesday morning when Variety published a 10,000-word investigative piece titled The Fall of House King, a Hollywood Tragedy in 3 Acts. The journalist had done real work, interviewed dozens of sources, traced financial records, documented the timeline of Leon's disownment and descent into homelessness. The article painted Gina and Regina not as victims of their father's erratic behavior, but as calculating predators who'd manipulated a vulnerable, elderly man, seized his empire, and discarded him when he became inconvenient. The public response was nuclear. Within hours, #boycott King Studios trended worldwide. Advertisers began pulling campaigns. Theater chains distanced themselves from King Entertainment releases. Industry figures who'd remained silent suddenly found their voices, condemning elder abuse and corporate greed. The sisters' carefully constructed narrative collapsed like a set made of cardboard. By noon, protesters gathered outside King Studios' gates, holding signs reading "Justice for Leon" and "Shame on Gina and Regina." News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live footage of the growing crowd. This wasn't just entertainment gossip anymore, it was a cultural moment about family, loyalty, and the corrosive nature of unchecked ambition. Gina and Regina convened an emergency meeting in Gina's Bel Air mansion, their alliance showing its first cracks under pressure. Publicists, lawyers, and crisis management consultants filled the living room, everyone talking over each other, proposing strategies that ranged from aggressive counterattacks to public apologies. "We need to settle with him," one lawyer advised. "Offer Leon a financial package, a public reconciliation. Make this go away before the shareholders revolt." "Absolutely not," Regina snapped. "That's admitting guilt. We did nothing wrong. He gave us the company voluntarily, in front of 50 witnesses. A company you're now running into the ground." Gina shot back. "Your theatrical division lost $40 million last quarter because you greenlit 3 bombs in a row. The international deals you negotiated are collapsing. This isn't just about Dad anymore, you're destroying the company with your incompetence." Regina's eyes flashed dangerously. "My incompetence? You're the one who alienated half our distribution partners with your condescending negotiation tactics. People hate working with you, Gina. They tolerated you when Dad was backing you up, but now you're just another MBA with no creative instincts." The room fell silent. The sisters stared at each other across the marble coffee table, and everyone present recognized the moment the alliance was fracturing. And when it broke completely, the collateral damage would be spectacular. That same afternoon, Edmund Cole made a critical mistake. Feeling invincible after months of unchallenged success, he arranged to meet with a journalist from the Hollywood Reporter, planning to plant stories about Duncan's declining mental fitness, setting the stage for Edmund to assume complete control of Gloucester Productions. But the journalist had done her homework. She'd spoken to Edward, seen the forensic evidence of the email forgery, interviewed IT staff who'd witnessed Edmund's manipulations. The interview turned into an interrogation. Edmund maintained his composure, denied everything with smooth confidence. But the journalist had him on record. Nowless, he'd have to maintain statements that could be checked and contradicted. When he left the meeting, Edmund felt the ground shifting beneath him for the first time. Edward watched the interview building from his apartment, his jaw still wired shut, his body still healing. He'd been feeding information to journalists for weeks through intermediaries, building a case in the court of public opinion since the legal system had failed him. Now the dam was breaking. Other victims of Edmund's schemes were coming forward, assistants he'd abused, executives he'd framed, competitors he'd sabotaged. The predator was becoming prey. Duncan Cole received a thumb drive in his office mail that afternoon. No return address, no note, just the drive. He plugged it into his computer and watched security footage he'd never seen before. Edmund accessing Edward's computer after hours. Edmund manipulating files. Edmund manufacturing the evidence that had destroyed his legitimate son. The truth played out in grainy black and white surveillance video, undeniable and damning. Duncan sat in his office as sunset painted the windows gold and red, and felt his world collapse. He'd destroyed his innocent son for a liar. He'd given his company to a sociopath. Pride and gullibility had cost him everything that mattered. In Silver Lake, Leon had a moment of perfect clarity. He sat at the kitchen table with Cora, drinking coffee, and his eyes focused with an awareness that had been absent for weeks. "I need to make this right," he said. "Your sisters are destroying themselves, destroying the company, destroying everything because I taught them that power was all that mattered. I need to fix this before I lose my mind completely." Cora took his hand. "Dad, you're not well enough. I'm dying, sweetheart. We both know it. My brain is dissolving a little more every day. But right now, in this moment, I'm here. I'm me, and I need to face them. Face what I created." Kent arranged the meeting at a neutral location, a conference room at a downtown hotel, away from studios and mansions and the wreckage of their family empire. Gina and Regina arrived separately, flanked by lawyers, neither speaking to the other. The sisterly alliance had shattered completely in the 3 days since their argument. They were now competing predators, circling the same dying, breaking studios, hemorrhaging money and reputation by the hour. Leon entered with Cora supporting one arm, Marcus the other. He wore a simple grey suit that hung loose on his diminished frame. His hands trembled constantly now, but his eyes were clear, focused. The medications and a morning of intense concentration had bought him a few hours of lucidity, and he intended to use every minute. "Thank you for coming," Leon said, his voice quiet but steady as he settled into a chair at the head of the conference table. The positioning was deliberate, King reclaiming his throne one last time. Gina spoke first, her tone coldly professional. "What do you want, Daddy? An apology? Money? We're in the middle of a crisis. In case you haven't noticed, I noticed. I created it." Leon folded his trembling hands on the table. "I gave you an empire and taught you nothing about how to run it except ruthlessness. I showed you that love was transactional, that loyalty was weakness, that power was the only thing worth having. And you learned those lessons perfectly." Regina laughed bitterly. "So this is a guilt trip. You're dying and you want us to absolve you. Sorry, but we're busy trying to salvage what's left of King Studios while you play victim for the press." "King Studios is finished," Kent interjected. "Your stock price is down 60%. 3 board members resigned yesterday. Your major talent agencies are steering clients away from your projects. You destroyed it through greed and incompetence. We destroyed it." Gina's voice rose. "He gave it away. He handed us a company with no transition plan, no unified strategy, just ego and sentiment. We've been fighting to keep it alive while he lived in motels and played homeless for sympathy. Leon absorbed the venom without flinching. You're right, I gave you something you weren't ready for. But you know what I've learned, sitting in that tiny apartment, watching daytime television and forgetting what day it is? The Empire never mattered. The Oscars, the money, the power, it was all smoke. The only thing that mattered was the three of you, and I destroyed you by teaching you to be like me. Tears streamed down his weathered face. Gina, do you remember when you were 7 and you wrote a play about a princess who saves herself? You made me sit in the living room and watch you perform all 15 characters. That was the happiest I'd ever seen you, creating something for pure joy, not for profit or awards. When did I kill that in you? Gina's professional mask cracked slightly. I grew up, Daddy. I learned that joy doesn't pay the bills. And Regina, you used to paint beautiful, wild, abstract paintings. You wanted to go to art school, but I told you art was a hobby. Business was real life. I channeled your creativity into making money instead of making meaning. I'm sorry. Regina's eyes glistened, but her voice remained hard. Apologies are cheap. They don't fix what's broken. No, they don't. Leon turned to Cordelia. Only Cora had the strength to reject what I was offering, to see that my gifts were poisoned. She told me the truth, and I destroyed her for it because I couldn't face my own failures. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the muffled sounds of city traffic far below. Finally, Gina spoke, her voice smaller, younger. What do you want from us, Daddy? Nothing. I want to give you something. Permission to stop. You're destroying each other, fighting over an empire that's already dead. The company is unsalvageable. Sell it. Break it apart. Walk away. You're both miserable. You hate each other, and you're sacrificing your humanity for quarterly earnings. That's the lesson I taught you, and it's the worst thing I ever did. Regina stood abruptly. This is pointless. You're senile, Cordelia's manipulating you, and I have actual work to do. She looked at Gina. When you're ready to discuss a real strategy instead of this emotional theater, call my office. She swept out, lawyers trailing behind. Gina remained seated, staring at her father with an expression impossible to read. She's right about one thing. You are dying. Your mind is going. And yes, we've made mistakes. But so did you. You don't get to play wise sage after a lifetime of being a tyrant. She stood, gathering her briefcase. But for what it's worth, I do remember that play. The princess saved herself by being smarter than everyone else, by manipulating people's expectations. Even at 7, I'd learned from you. She left, and the conference room felt cavernous and empty. Cora squeezed her father's hand. You tried, Dad. Leon's lucidity was already fading, his eyes losing focus. Did I? I can't remember what I said. Why are we in a hotel? 3 days after the failed reconciliation, everything collapsed simultaneously. At Gloucester Productions, Duncan Cole called a company-wide meeting and stood before 200 employees with tears streaming down his face. He played the security footage of Edmund's betrayal on the massive screen behind him, every manipulation exposed in grainy black and white clarity. Edward stood beside his father, his jaw still wired shut, silent witness to his vindication. I destroyed my son for a lie, Duncan said, his voice breaking. I gave my company to a sociopath because I was too proud and too foolish to question convenient evidence. Edmund Cole is fired, effective immediately. Security will escort him from the building. Edward, if you can forgive me, I'm begging you to come back. Edmund was arrested in the parking garage, the same garage where he'd arranged Edward's beating. Assault, fraud, corporate, espionage. The charges would keep him in prison for years. As police led him away in handcuffs, Edmund's mask finally slipped, revealing the cold rage underneath. "I earned everything I took," he shouted. "I was smarter, better, more deserving than any of you. The bastard should have inherited it all." His words echoed off concrete walls as the police car drove away. That same afternoon, Gina and Regina met one final time at King Studios. The board had demanded their joint resignation. Stock had plummeted to penny stock levels. Creditors were circling. The empire Leon had built over 40 years would be sold for parts within the month production library to Netflix. Real estate to developers. The legendary King Studios name retired forever into Hollywood history. The sisters stood in Leon's old office, the one they'd fought over, schemed over, destroyed each other over. Decades of photographs lined the walls. Leon with movie stars, with presidents, at premieres and award ceremonies. A whole life measured in captured moments of glory. "We lost it all," Gina said quietly. "Everything he built, everything we fought for, gone." Regina stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the sound stages below. Did we ever really have it? Or were we just actors playing parts he wrote for us? "I don't know anymore. I don't know who I am without this." The sisters looked at each other, and for the first time in years, they saw past the competition to the scared children they'd once been, fighting for scraps of their father's attention. Regina reached out, and Gina took her hand. They stood together in the empty office as the California sun set over their fallen kingdom. Two queens who'd conquered nothing and lost everything. In Silver Lake, Leon's final decline came swiftly. The effort of the hotel meeting had exhausted his remaining reserves. He spent 3 days in bed, drifting in and out of consciousness, calling for people long dead, his wife, his own father, actors and directors from films made decades ago. Cora sat vigil beside him, holding his hand, telling him stories from her childhood, reminding him of the rare good moments they'd shared. On the 4th morning, Leon woke with unusual clarity. Dawn light streamed through the small apartment windows, golden and gentle. He looked at Cordelia and knew exactly who she was, where they were, what had happened. "I wasted so much time," he whispered, "chasing things that didn't matter, building monuments to my own ego, while the people I loved withered from neglect. You're here now, Dad. That's what matters. Am I forgiven?" Cora kissed his forehead. "You were always forgiven. I was just waiting for you to forgive yourself." Leon smiled, and something in his expression softened, released. The trembling in his hands calmed. "I'm so tired, sweetheart." "Then rest, Daddy. It's okay to rest. Will you stay with me?" "I'm not going anywhere." Leon closed his eyes, his breathing slowing, becoming peaceful. Cora held his hand and sang softly a lullaby her mother used to sing, one Leon had probably never heard because he was always at the studio, always chasing the next deal, the next hit, the next conquest. But he heard it now, in his final moments, and it was enough. He died at 9:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning in a rent-controlled apartment in Silver Lake, surrounded by the only people who'd truly loved him, his youngest daughter, his loyal assistant, and his oldest friend. No paparazzi, no media circus, no grand Hollywood funeral, just a quiet passing into whatever came next. Kent called Gina and Regina to inform them. Both said they'd attend the funeral, though their voices were hollow, mechanical. They'd already moved on to salvaging what they could from their own wreckage. The funeral was held at a small chapel in Pasadena 5 days later. The entertainment industry mostly stayed Orwellian king had become too controversial, too tragic, too much of a reminder that power was temporary and empires built on vanity crumbled to dust. but a few came. Frankie Shaw, Leon's publicist, wearing a vintage Clash t-shirt under her black blazer. Harold Porter, the homeless man from the bridge, cleaned up in donated clothes. Gloria from the Blue Star Motor Lodge. The crew from Cora's documentary projects. People Leon had helped decades ago when he still remembered kindness. Gina and Regina sat in the front row, separate and silent, two strangers who happened to share DNA. They didn't speak at the service, didn't offer eulogies. They'd already said everything that mattered, and nothing that did. Cora stood at the simple casket and spoke about the father she'd known in fragments, the dreamer who'd once loved movies before he loved power, the broken man who'd finally learned what mattered when it was too late. He taught me what not to do, she said, and in the end, he taught me about forgiveness. Both lessons were gifts, even if he didn't mean them to be. After the service, as people filed out into afternoon sunshine, Kent found Cora in the chapel, staring at the closed casket. What will you do now? Go back to New Mexico? Finish the documentary? Keep making films about people no one else wants to see? Dad left me a little insurance money, not much, but enough. She smiled sadly. Turns out he'd kept one policy the lawyers didn't know about. Even at the end, he was trying to take care of me. He loved you. He just didn't know how to show it until everything else was stripped away. I know. And I loved him. The real him, underneath all the rest. Kent hugged her tightly. You're the best of him, Cora. The part that mattered. Outside, Los Angeles continued its indifferent sprawl beneath California sky. King Studios would be sold and bulldozed within a year, luxury condos rising where soundstages once stood. The films Leon had produced would remain, streaming on platforms he'd never heard of, watched by generations who'd never know his name. The empire dissolved, but the art imperfect, flawed, occasionally brilliant survived. Cordelia King drove back to her Silver Lake apartment alone, windows down, letting warm wind wash over her. On the radio, a song from a movie her father had produced played, one of his early films, before he became legend, when he still believed in magic. She turned it up and drove through the city that had built her father up and torn him down, that had taught him everything except what actually mattered. She'd lost her father twice, once when he disowned her, once when he died. But in between, for a few precious months, she'd found him. The real Leon King, stripped of power and pretense. Just a frightened old man, learning to live small and finding unexpected grace in the reduction. It wasn't the ending he'd wanted, but it was the ending he'd earned. And in the strange arithmetic of Hollywood tragedies, that was its own kind of justice. The sun set over Los Angeles in shades of amber and violet, another day ending in the city of angels and broken dreams, while somewhere, in Silver Lake, a young filmmaker sat on a tiny balcony and remembered her father forgiving him completely, letting him go at last.